There are voices that don't just sing to you. They stay with you. They follow you through the years, through heartbreaks and road trips and quiet Sunday mornings. Kenny Rogers had one of those voices, warm, unhurried, and unmistakably human. Whether he was telling you to know when to hold them or whispering about an island in the stream, he had a way of making you feel like he was singing just for you. But behind that voice, behind the white beard and the easy smile, was a man quietly fighting battles that most of the world never knew about. A man who, in his final years, stepped away from the spotlight not because he wanted to, but because his body was giving out on him. A man who spent his last days surrounded by family on a Georgia estate, far from the roar of the crowd that had defined 6 decades of his life. Today, we're going to tell you the full story of how Kenny Rogers spent his final days, the health struggles he kept private, the farewell that broke hearts across the country, the last goodbye he said to his dearest friend, and the quiet, peaceful end that came to one of the greatest entertainers America has ever known. This story will move you. It may even break your heart, but it is a story worth telling, because Kenny Rogers deserves nothing less than the full truth. Before we get to the end, we need to understand the size of what Kenny Rogers built over his lifetime, because only then can you fully feel the weight of losing it. Kenneth Ray Rogers was born in Houston, Texas, into a family that knew poverty well. He was the 4th of 8 children, raised in a government housing project, and his early years were shaped by hard work, hunger, and the kind of grit that only comes from having nothing. He once said that the family was not just poor, they were nutritionally deprived. Peanut butter sandwiches were a luxury on some nights. But Kenny had something that no amount of poverty could take away: music. He could feel it, shape it, and deliver it in a way that moved people. He won a local talent show at age 11. He played in jazz clubs and folk groups. He bounced between record labels, faced rejection after rejection, and still refused to quit. When producers told him he was too old for country music, in his late 30s, no less, he simply kept going. Then came Lucille, and everything changed. The song shot to #1, won him a Grammy Award, and kicked open a door that would never fully close again. What followed was one of the most extraordinary careers in the history of American popular music. The Gambler, Lady, Islands in the Stream, Coward of the County, She Believes in Me. Hit after hit after hit. He sold more than albums worldwide. He won 3 Grammy Awards and 6 CMA Awards. He was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. He acted in films and television. He built a restaurant chain that still operates in Southeast Asia today. For 6 full decades, Kenny Rogers was everywhere. And then, slowly and painfully, he began to disappear. It did not happen overnight. Kenny Rogers was not the kind of man to complain publicly. Those who knew him said he always tried to take the most optimistic approach to his health problems. He did not want pity. He did not want headlines about his suffering. He wanted to be remembered for the music, not the illness. So for a long time, the full extent of what he was enduring stayed out of the public eye. What we know now is that Kenny spent the final years of his life battling a collection of serious health conditions. Reports indicated he had been dealing with hepatitis C for more than 25 years, a viral infection that quietly damages the liver over time. He also battled bladder cancer, severe back pain that had worsened over years of touring, as well as high blood pressure and diabetes. For a man who had spent decades standing on stage under hot lights, night after night, the physical toll had accumulated in ways that could no longer be ignored. To his credit, Kenny had always been conscious of at least one health decision. He never drank alcohol. Growing up watching his father struggle with alcoholism had left a deep scar, and Kenny had made a lifelong commitment to stay sober. He feared that addiction might run in the family, and he never gave it the chance to claim him. That discipline was one of the things that kept him going for as long as he did, but it could not stop time. By the time he announced his farewell tour, the signs were already there. He called the tour The Gambler's Last Deal, and there was something honest in that title. He toured through and into pushing himself through shows across the United States, Australia, Scotland, Ireland, England, the Netherlands, and Switzerland. Fans packed arenas to see him. He gave them everything he had left. But behind the scenes, his health was deteriorating steadily, and the people closest to him could see it. And with additional tour dates planned, Kenny made the call to cancel. He cited health challenges in his public statement, keeping the details private. He said simply, "I didn't want to take forever to retire." It was a dignified way of stepping back, but those close to him knew the truth was far more serious. Before all of that, however, there was one final night, one last grand gathering, one evening where the music world came together to send Kenny Rogers off the way only Nashville could, with love, with laughter, and with songs. On at the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville, Tennessee, an all-star concert called All In for the Gambler. Kenny Rogers' farewell concert celebration brought together some of the biggest names in music to honor the man who had given so much of himself to his craft. The lineup was extraordinary. Dolly Parton, Lionel Richie, Reba McEntire, Chris Stapleton, Alison Krauss, Chris Christopherson, Lady A, Idina Menzel, The Flaming Lips, The Judds, Don Henley, Little Big Town, Elle King, Jamie Johnson, and many more, all gathered under one roof for one man. Chris Stapleton performed The Gambler. Lionel Richie, who had written Lady for Kenny back in, came out and sang it again, the way only the man who wrote it could. Reba McEntire honored him. Alison Krauss brought tears to eyes throughout the arena. And then, in the moment everyone had been waiting for, Dolly Parton walked out onto the stage. She and Kenny had been friends for decades, one of the most beloved partnerships in country music history. Their duet, Islands in the Stream, had been a worldwide #1 hit, and their chemistry on stage was something audiences had never tired of. That night in Nashville, with arm in arm and voices joined, they sang it one final time. It was the last time Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton would ever perform together in public. Standing at the mic, Kenny told the crowd, "Tonight is as much about me saying thank you as it is goodbye. It's been 60 years of great talent." Dolly, her voice steady despite the emotion of the moment, declared, "I can't think of anyone I would rather sail away with." The arena was electric with feeling. People wept openly. Kenny himself, who had always been a little uncomfortable with tributes aimed in his direction, could not hold back the emotion of the night entirely. But he carried it with grace, the way he had carried everything in his life. When the concert ended, many in the audience sensed that they were witnessing the closing of something irreplaceable. They were right. After the farewell concert and the cancellation of his remaining tour dates, and Kenny Rogers retreated to a life most people never saw. He settled at his estate in Sandy Springs, Georgia, and turned his attention to the things that had always mattered most to him: his family, his peace, and the quiet rhythms of a life away from stages. His wife, Wanda Miller, was by his side. The two had married in, with a 28-year age difference that had raised eyebrows at the time, but had proven to be a genuine and lasting partnership. Wanda had given him twin sons, Justin and Jordan, born in, and Kenny had spoken openly about how much they meant to him. By the time he retired fully, the boys were teenagers. He had always feared that becoming a father again so late in life meant he would miss the most important chapters of their growing up. That fear now drove him to be present in whatever time he had left. Those who knew him in these final years described a man who was at peace with where his life had taken him, but who was also quietly putting his affairs in order. He signed over his home to Wanda. He spent time with his children. He said the goodbyes that needed saying. It was the behavior of a man who understood what was coming, and who faced it not with bitterness, but with the same quiet dignity that had defined his entire life. One of the most heartbreaking moments of his final period came when Dolly Parton, unwilling to simply let him fade without a fight, reached out to him and begged him to come and record some new songs with her. She wanted one more chapter of their story. She wanted to remind him that the music was still there, even if the touring was over. But by that point, Kenny could no longer manage even the short drive to join her. He had declined so significantly that standing for more than a few minutes at a time had become impossible. He told her goodbye, a real goodbye, the kind that both of them understood might be the last one. It was a moment that those close to both artists have described as deeply painful. Two old friends, separated not by distance, but by time running out. The world in March was already in a state of disorientation. The pandemic had descended across the globe. Cities were locking down, and people were glued to their screens looking for news that made sense. And then, on the night of a different kind of news arrived. Kenny Rogers passed away. at his home in Sandy Springs, Georgia. He was 81 years old. He died peacefully, under hospice care, surrounded by the people he loved most, his wife Wanda and his 5 children. The family's official statement confirmed that he had passed away from natural causes. There was no drama, no emergency room, no last-minute crisis. Just a quiet room, and the people who loved him, and a man who had lived a full and extraordinary life, finally letting go. The family released their announcement the following morning. They explained that because of the national emergency, they were planning only a small private service, with hopes to celebrate Kenny's life publicly with his fans at a later date. It was a heartbreaking footnote to an already heartbreaking moment, that one of the most beloved entertainers in American history would leave the world without the public farewell his fans so desperately wanted to give him. But that, too, felt like something Kenny Rogers might have quietly preferred. He had never been entirely comfortable being the center of a tribute. Within hours, the tributes began pouring in, and they came not just from fans, but from the people who had stood beside him on the biggest stages of his life. Dolly Parton, who had lost her closest musical partner, shared an emotional video on her social media. Through tears, she told her followers, "I couldn't believe it when I got up this morning and turned on the TV, checking to see what the coronavirus was doing, and it told me that my friend and singing partner Kenny Rogers had passed away." She asked people to keep the faith, and she ended with words that sounded like a prayer. "God bless you, Kenny. Fly high, straight to the arms of God." Lionel Richie, who had written Lady for Kenny 40 years earlier and who had performed it at the farewell concert, shared old photographs of the two of them and wrote, "Today I lost one of my closest friends. So much laughter, so many adventures to remember. My heart is broken." Richie and Rogers had been close for decades. Theirs was not just a professional bond, but a genuine friendship forged over years of shared stages and shared lives. The grief in Richie's words was real and raw. Country music legend Bobby Bare, a fellow Country Music Hall of Fame member, reflected, "He had a magic voice, instantly recognizable. I will miss my friend." From every corner of the music world, the messages came. Reba McEntire, who had stood on that Nashville stage just over 2 years before, shared her sorrow. Garth Brooks called him a pioneer. Artists from every genre reached out to acknowledge the size of the hole that had been left behind. The Grammys honored him at the following year's ceremony. The Grammy Awards featured Lionel Richie performing Lady during the In Memoriam segment, Full Circle, the song written for his friend, now sung as a final tribute to him. It was one of the most emotionally charged moments in recent Grammy history. There are artists who become famous, and then there are artists who become part of the fabric of people's lives. Kenny Rogers was the second kind. He sold more than 120 million albums in a career that crossed jazz, rock, folk, country, and pop. He had 24 #1 hits. He won 3 Grammy Awards. He earned a Country Music Hall of Fame induction. He starred in films and television movies. He built a business empire. He wrote a New York Times best-selling memoir. And The Gambler, perhaps his most iconic song, was added to the Library of Congress's National Recording Registry and recognized as a piece of American cultural heritage worthy of preservation for all time. But what made Kenny Rogers truly irreplaceable was not any of those achievements on paper. It was the way he made people feel. His songs were not just songs. They were life lessons wrapped in music. The Gambler taught an entire generation about knowing when to walk away. She Believes in Me gave voice to the quiet dignity of being loved by someone who sees the best in you. Through the years, became the soundtrack of thousands of weddings and anniversaries. Islands in the Stream became a symbol of perfect partnership, of two voices that made each other better. He was also, by all accounts, a genuinely kind man, a man who remembered where he came from, a man who, when he found out a childhood neighbor was struggling to afford a car repair years after he became famous, sent her $20,000 and a handwritten note thanking her for her past kindness. A man who, even in his final years, joked with his sister Sandy about her hair color and made people laugh. A man who worried not about his own legacy, but about whether he had been present enough for the people he loved. His sister Sandy Rogers, speaking after his passing, captured something essential about who her brother really was. She remembered their father walking onto the stage at one of Kenny's early concerts and beginning to bow alongside his son, until Kenny had to gently tell him, "Dad, this is my show." She laughed at the memory. Even in grief, the Rogers family found ways to celebrate the humor and the warmth that defined the man they had loved. A year after Kenny's passing, the Rogers family and his team released a message to fans on social media. "It's so hard to believe it's been a year since Kenny left us," the message began. They described the year as filled with both tears and laughter, and they thanked fans for their kindness and support throughout. The message ended with a line that felt like something Kenny himself might have said. "We can all take some comfort in knowing the music lives on." And that is the truth, isn't it? The music lives on. Kenny Rogers spent his final years not chasing fame, not scrambling for relevance, but doing the most human things imaginable. He sat with his wife. He watched his twin boys grow. He said his goodbyes to the people who mattered. He put his house in order, in every sense of the phrase. He faced the end of his life with the same quiet acceptance he had always brought to the hard chapters. No bitterness, no rage, no desperate grasping, just grace. There is something in the gambler that has always sounded a little like wisdom from beyond the ordinary. No one to hold him, no one to fold him, no one to walk away. Kenny Rogers lived those words. When it was time to walk away from a stage, he did it with dignity. When it was time to let go of everything else, he did that with dignity, too. He was old. He had loved 5 times, built an empire, sung songs that will outlast all.